A scene that most Americans never expected and certainly never wanted to see. A prayer vigil at the U.S. Congress earlier today in memory of those who died as a result of the terrorist attack. This is ongoing ABC News coverage. We simply pass the baton from one anchor to another as this goes on, and so as I conclude our coverage now from London this evening, I'm Ted Koppel, passing it on to Derek McGinty in New York.
This is an ABC News special report.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is ABC's continuing live coverage of the terrorist attack on the United States. I'm Derek McGinty. Well, after more than 42 hours since the attack began, scores of rescue workers are still painstakingly combing through the tons of debris that used to be the World Trade Center. At the Pentagon, the fire is finally out. The grim task, however, continues of searching for and counting the victims. It's going to go on around the clock. We begin, though, at the site of the New York attack, where my colleague Allison Stewart is standing by right now. Good morning, Allison.
And good morning, Derek. I'm down here at the lower tip of Manhattan, where all you can see are the heroic workers going in and out as we were walking down here. And I do say walking because, again, the lower tip of Manhattan is completely sectioned off. People are along the streets cheering these heroes, cheering these workers who are working tirelessly through the 110 floors of what is now rubble that was the Twin Towers. I've been here for just a short period of time, and I can tell you I've seen at least 10 different dump trucks leave full and 10 different ones come in empty. Trucks from as far away as Wharton, New Jersey, fire companies as far away as Hartford, Connecticut, all aiding in the effort to try to rescue the people who are possibly still in the rubble. There just goes another fire truck from another company outside of New York. We'll be bringing you live reports from here for the next 3 hours, Derek. Back to you at the studio.
All right, thank you, Allison. And of course, the grim task continues there. One firefighter quoted in one of the many news stories here saying, "We didn't even find people, we just found little pieces ground up like the dust all in the area." It's becoming a search more for victims than a relief effort, although hope still continues as there may be some folks still found alive. That hope getting dimmer and dimmer all the time. We turn now to the United States' reaction to this awful attack. President Bush has called the attacks an act of war. Of course, the Congress, moved very quickly today, and we'll talk about the extensive search for those responsible with ABC's Rebecca Cooper, who now joins us from Washington. Good morning, Rebecca. Rebecca, we're having trouble hearing you. I'm sure we'll be able to get back to you in just a little while. Earlier today, we will note that the U.S. Congress, in a unanimous vote, basically condemned the attacks and said that the president could basically have whatever he needs. President Bush had asked, apparently, for a blank check to deal with this. They didn't want to do that, though, and we're going to get back to that later and talk a little bit more about some of the politics and policies involved as the United States ramps up for whatever response that is decided to be given for this. But President Bush, again, has called this an act of war. Meantime, at the Pentagon, the fire finally extinguished last night. It took more than 24 hours since that hijacked jetliner slammed into the building. ABC's Jim Sciutto is there right now. Good morning, Jim. And I have to ask you, why did it take so long to get that fire out?
Derek, it was just a huge fire. You could see the smoke while it was still burning for 31 hours, actually, from miles around. And firemen were hard at work for many hours. Lots of water sprayed on top of the building. Finally, at about 8 o'clock Eastern time last night, they were able to bring the fire under control. They still have firefighters on the roof making sure there aren't hot spots to be safe. But really the focus now on shoring up the building to make it safe for rescue teams to go in, search and rescue teams to go in and look for victims, possibly survivors. Still holding out hope for survivors, but we spoke to the fire chief in charge of this operation just a couple of hours ago. He said that hope is very slim.
It sounds like you ought to be able to just walk right in there and see everything. When you've had the blast patterns and the fire occurrence there, when you walk in these floors, they're not open, they're not clean, they're not well lit. some of our rescuers will literally have to climb over debris that's kind of been strewn around and piled up in a natural way that might be chest high. It's hard to know who or what might be under there.
This is still a crime scene, Derek, so even when victims found, they're not going to be removed right away. The FBI has to take a look at them, mark them, gather evidence, that sort of thing, and then the military will be responsible for removing them. Establishing the numbers of missing, still very tough at this time. They're not saying how many bodies they recovered, and the Pentagon is not confirming the total number of missing. They say one thing that is making it more difficult is that the building was under renovation. They're not sure who was in what offices when that plane struck. Derek?
ABC's Jim Shudo, thank you. And of course, we'll be getting back to you later on in our broadcast here because there are many questions about the effort to shore up that damaged section of the Pentagon and just how long that might take and what people might find once they are able to go inside. Meantime, as we told you earlier, we have Rebecca Cooper in Washington who can tell us a little bit about what the reaction is and a little bit about what the Congress and the President have in mind in terms of what this country ought to do now. Rebecca?
Good morning, Derek. Yes, the Congress sent over their bipartisan leadership to the White House yesterday to meet with the president. Democrats made it clear that they are prepared to support the president wholeheartedly. A key aide to Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle said he came to the White House not with any questions or concerns to express to the White House about what steps they may need to take, but to say that it's up to the commander-in-chief to determine what retaliatory measures are necessary, and the United States Congress will back them. They have already passed a very strongly worded resolution, but the White House is telling ABC News that they may indeed need an even more strongly worded resolution to support them for force measures, any measures necessary. And those measures may follow upon what has been a very rapid response by U.S. law enforcement. Sources tell ABC News' Pierre Thomas and investigative reporters Chris Isham and Chris Vlasto at ABC News that law enforcement has already identified at least 15 of the hijackers responsible for the 4 planes that were overtaken and used in the attack, and another additional 5 to 7 support personnel. That leads us to 24 that have already been identified, and they may be able to move in to as many as 25 additional. So as the LA Times is also reporting this morning, there may be up to 50 people that they can identify in the next 24 to 48 hours, and there have already been some individuals taken into custody. They moved into a hotel in Boston and were able to take 3 people into custody that they have suspected of being involved in the attack. A senior administration official told me earlier that there are a number of countries, a surprising number of countries, that are helping the United States to gather the intelligence necessary to hone in on the individuals. Plus, the United States already had a great deal of information about the individuals who have been identified on the plane manifests of having been on these flights, 6 of whom were trained pilots, trained, in fact, in the United States. And 2 of these individuals were, in fact, listed on what is called the INS Border Watch, which means that those 2 individuals should have been questioned more carefully before even being allowed into the United States. Derek?
Rebecca Cooper, thank you so much for that update, and we'll come back to you a little later because there are additional questions about that statement you made regarding wanting more authorization than Congress has already given the president for retaliation in this case. Well, now we will turn to Allison Stewart, who joins us again from the site, and it tells us exactly what's going on there. Allison?
Derek, hi. I'm sorry, Derek, it's Allison, and I'm down here in Lower Manhattan. I'm joined by 2 of the people who have been working tirelessly. In fact, Jay, you just asked me what time it is. How long have you been here?
Maybe 12 hours, I don't know, 10 hours, 8 hours, I don't know. What time is it, 3? Yeah, like 10 hours.
One of the things that's so amazing about what's going on down here, Derek, is that there's men in uniform of all different kinds, National Guard, police, fire. You folks are city transit workers. What are you doing down here?
Well, we're just helping out in any way we can. It's a national tragedy here, you know, any way we can. If we can, whatever we can do out there, sweep, anything.
Sure. Describe for me how you guys are going about going through the wreckage. You described the process.
Well, I'm not actually going through the wreckage. We're not going through the wreckage, but we're helping out in any way we can, and the machinery, there's going machinery, some guys piece by whatever guys helping the machinery, any way they can do it, you know.
How long have you been here, Matt?
been here about 10 hours.
And over the course of 10 hours, what have you seen in terms of the stability of the buildings?
Well, One Liberty Plaza doesn't look too great. A couple of guys are saying they heard rumbles early today, and some people actually were making a run for it, and it's a pretty hectic scene over there.
You guys, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for helping everybody out.
Right.
Back to you, Derek, in the studio.
All right, Allison Stewart, thank you so much for that. We want to bring you up to date again on what is going on right now in case you're just joining us. Rescue crews still facing a very dangerous situation, combing through the rubble of the World Trade Center. As you can see, there is a lot left to be done. Meantime, in a sign of just how staggering the death toll could be, and this is a very tough figure, New York officials have asked for 6,000 body bags. The president and Congress are talking about possible retaliation. The L.A. Times reports 10 suspected accomplices in the attacks are still at large, and hundreds of federal agents are stepping up security at airports. Some airports have reopened, but a large majority of commercial flights remain grounded. Meantime, in the business world, the stock markets will still be closed today, and they may be closed until Monday. I want to just update you a bit more on that issue of the FBI attackers, or possible suspected attackers. The FBI reports that as many as 50 infiltrators could have been involved in these strikes. The sources, according to the Los Angeles Times, says 40 of those men have now been accounted for. The 10 we talked about earlier are the ones remaining at large. And there is any number of agents, thousands as a matter of fact, going after them in perhaps the most massive and intensive investigation ever conducted in this country. Meantime, it is too early to put a price tag on all this damage. The director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Joe Albaugh, talked with ABC's Peter Jennings about all the work that lies ahead.
We've asked you here tonight, you've been good enough to come to talk about your current role. The last time I think you and I talked on the telephone was about the Mississippi River.
That's exactly right.
And as tough as it seemed at the time, man, it just seems tiny now compared to what you've had to deal with today and yesterday. Give me first your reaction to what you saw yesterday and today.
I am stunned by the devastation, quite frankly, Peter, but I am impressed this afternoon. We visited the site. I am impressed by the spirit of New York City, that resilience. And Governor Pataki and I happened to walk the street along with Mayor Giuliani, and we ran into several firefighters who had just come out of the rubble from Long Island firefighters. And you can see on their faces the devastation, the toll it's taking, which is something that I'm concerned with. Those rescuers right now, at some point we're going to have to roll those people out, get them some rest after about 48, 72 hours, make sure that everyone has the proper counseling. This is a tough, tough issue, Peter.
Now, can we try to parse this in a couple of ways? You said you were struck by the extent of the devastation. We just had an emergency doctor who sat beside and said, you're just not getting it on television. And I think we all appreciate that. What are we missing watching it on television that you've seen at street level?
Well, it's hard to appreciate the realism when you watch the film, watch the B-roll on television. When you visit the site in person, it rains down on you. The whole weight of the world almost rests on your shoulders when you see that. And just looking at the task down the road, it is almost insurmountable. But this country is resilient. We can handle just about anything. And those folks who are on the ground right now, we need to say a thanks, a prayer, especially to those folks who lost their lives.
What do you mean that it's almost insurmountable?
The concept is almost insurmountable. I'm from Oklahoma.
I know.
I visited the Oklahoma City site the day after the bombing. And immediately it passed in front of my eyes, probably by a factor of 25 or 50. Just the devastation. Take aside the loss of a life. Just the devastation downtown is just unbelievable. What we'll have to remove over the next several weeks, possibly even several months. This is a long-term process. This will take a while for everyone to heal. Everyone needs to have patience. And at the same time, we're working as quickly as we can to recover as many people as we possibly can.
I know that it is almost the obligation of a public official to be optimistic in some way. You must have an optimistic face, or wear an optimistic face at a moment like this. But my guess is, based on other people we've talked to, if you haven't seen much out there in the last hours to make you think that many people are going to be recovered.
That's a tough issue. You never want to give up hope. And we're not going to give up hope. There are pockets where the building pancaked down, where folks could be still alive. Time is precious. Time is running out. We have to move quickly. We moved in 12 USAR teams, urban search and rescue teams.
Right.
These are professionals, highly trained, technical experts with dogs to assist New York City's finest, police and fire department. We have medical teams, hospitals that we moved in, fully staffed with nurses, doctors, to assist in the recovery effort, as well as, unfortunately, mortuary teams. We have to deal with that realistic part of this devastation.
Explain to people what a mortuary team is.
They will come in and they will assist local officials in identification more than anything else. Make sure that everyone is taken care of in proper fashion, in a respectful fashion, and a timely fashion.
What does the national government actually have as assets that the city and the state don't have?
We're not here to supplant any efforts that are going on. We're here to facilitate anything that they need. I know specifically this afternoon and today, my first conversation this morning with Governor Pataki was about power, making sure that we had necessary generators, for example.
And
we do, of course we do. We have the full assets of the federal government, which is quite a vast array and supply.
And it is a quantitative question you know people ask. And maybe it helps us measure the destruction only at this moment. Do you have the vaguest understanding of what this is going to cost the country and the federal government?
No. Quite frankly, I think it's immaterial. It's always an issue. It's important to know what it's going to cost. We have no idea at this point. This is going to take weeks to develop and years to plan and rebuild.
You and everybody else we've talked to, and we ourselves, have been deeply impressed by the spirit of volunteerism from very distant points in the country, but this is ultimately a job that has to be done by professionals for the most part. Does New York City, does, to a lesser extent, the Pentagon, have the resources that it needs either in place or in the pipeline at the moment?
Absolutely. We have everything that we need. We're being inundated, as you say, with requests for folks to come in and volunteer. One thing we have to do right now and be cautious is to say thanks, no thanks, not right now. We don't want to overburden the system that's already in place and hinder that process that's going on with those professionals.
No,
but we have everything what we need, Peter.
And it's not your immediate concern. I appreciate it's more an issue for the Red Cross, but do you know the current situation on blood supplies? Because so many people around the country have wanted and have given blood.
I appreciate that. They should give blood, quite frankly. The country, the world always needs a constant blood supply. I think for the foreseeable future, the next several days, we're going to be fine here on the East Coast.
What are we missing?
I don't know that we're missing much, quite frankly. I ask that question of my staff all the time. What is it we're not doing? What is it we ought to be thinking about? Praying for those who lost their life, praying for those who are trying to recover other lives right now. We have a strong country. This is an amazing land that we live in. People try to replicate the spirit that we have in this country. They can replicate some of the emergency procedures that we have, but they can't replicate that spirit, and that's what's unique about America. And we'll get through this, Peter. It's going to be tough, but we'll get through it.
You're a longtime friend and an ally of the president at a very personal level, as I said, by way of introducing the fact that you were coming. You're one of the people who helped him campaign and get elected in the country. How much contact have you had with him? How's he taking it personally? I don't mean from a president's point of view, I mean personally.
I've worked with this man for over 8 years now, and I have never seen anything in my life that has, or during that time period, that has affected the president as this incident has. I was with him yesterday evening for several hours. I've been with him all morning this morning before he instructed me to come to New York City, and I'll report back what I've learned today, and we'll make the necessary decisions based upon that. But this has had a profound effect on the president, just like it has on every American, as it should.
Many thanks, Joe Albaugh, the director of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, not under these circumstances,
Absolutely.
but it's nice to see you, Joe.
Joe Albaugh called it insurmountable, but it will be done because it has to be. Now, let's return to Washington, where President Bush and the Congress have been getting together, trying to figure out exactly what the retaliation will be for Tuesday's terror attacks. Meantime, though, there has also been a reaction that is more spiritual in nature. ABC's Josh Gerstein joins us now from Washington. You're in a hotel just a block or so from the White House.
Good morning, Derek. That's right. There has been an outpouring of emotional support, an emotional response to the disasters, both there in New York and here in Washington, just across the river at the Pentagon. Today we had, or I should say yesterday, we had a series of prayer vigils across the city, the largest one taking place up on Capitol Hill, with hundreds of members of Congress participating, as well as young people conducting a vigil outside the White House. A lot of prayers being said, songs being sung. We heard the national anthem being sung repeatedly, God Bless America, some people coming with American flags. There was another sort of moving vigil that took place on the Mall outside the reflecting pool, then moving across to the fence of the White House. Young people, more than 100 of them standing there with candles. Some of these well organized and others of them very spontaneous, very emotional, as I say, reaction from residents of the Washington area. Derek?
All right, Josh Gerstein, thank you. We'll be talking with you a little later. Very difficult not to get emotional at this time. I think everybody has talked about crying, at least at some point in all this. Meantime, though, the devastation around the World Trade Center collapse has a lot of New Yorkers who are not firefighters, who are not police officers, not experts of any kind, showing up just to see what they could do to help. ABC's Bob Brown went along with one of those groups of workers, and they had a special reason to pitch in.
For my partner, I got one. We just need people to work, that's all.
Ordinary people came from all walks of life to a staging area for volunteers, hoping they would somehow be useful. This man is a cave explorer.
Anybody who's not a psycho and has a legitimate skill is probably going to be useful eventually.
This man simply brought a shovel.
Listen to me. Send somebody out to lead us in. We're all coming in.
But no volunteers were more persistent than these men, whose union had helped build the World Trade Center.
We built it.
They are all members of the Iron Workers Union, and they carried spud wrenches and acetylene torches.
Yeah, you got 40s up there. Let's go.
They had come from work sites throughout the city, and all of them knew to an inch how tall buildings are put together and how to take them apart.
I'm scared I'll tell you right now. But the fact of the matter is that thousands of our people probably are in there. And how many people could still be alive? I mean, this is what we do.
The World Trade Center was a legendary job among these men, even those who were born after its completion at the beginning of the 1970s.
Stand back. Stay as close as you can where you're not in the way.
But for hours, they stood cut off from the rubble, feeling both fierce and helpless because they were not allowed into the rescue area. In the midst of a frustrating afternoon, evidence of why they had not been sent in. Number 7 World Trade Center collapsed.
You guys have been doing this all day. Let's just wait a couple minutes. It's not going to make... 7 was empty.
Okay, somebody might have been pulled out. Somebody else might have died, but at least we would have had a shot at pulling somebody out who just died.
We don't make those decisions.
Right. Sooner or later, you're going to come across some gruesome stuff, so...
By the time darkness fell, swarms of other volunteers had gathered with those who had been there since late morning. Finally, the ironworkers appeared to be on the move. They were trucked to another staging area beneath the Brooklyn Bridge, and they began talking about the fine details of knowing when and how to cut a beam of twisted steel that could snap back like a spring.
If you cut a piece of steel here, okay, you might think that you're safe, but it's under such a strain from everything being twisted and pulled that it might, send you for a ride.
They were held in limbo again, willing to be there as long as it took. 5, then 6, then 7 hours they waited.
We're going to hang out as long as it takes. We built the Trade Center. We built, and we feel like it's a direct hit to us,
At 11:01, the journey in began, and the landscape changed. Through streets filled with dust and ash, past trucks waiting to haul away debris, exhausted police and firemen with dazed looks, into a nightmare set in another world that was named for the center of a nuclear blast, Ground Zero.
The buildings are gone, and that's what gets to you. When you make that one turn and you're actually starting to head uptown, the Trade Center's just not there anymore. It's just a facade is standing up, and everything was covered in white, and the soot was just blowing. You couldn't keep your eyes open.
Brushed by a wind that scattered dust and papers through the streets, they went to work. The high towers they had built were now represented by a jagged, angular facade with nothing beyond. One of the iron workers, Bobby Benish, was in a group that reached a goal they had all sought. As they moved and dug, they found a woman who was alive.
It was a good feeling that we had, and everybody shared that.
Did you even know her name?
No.
Don't matter.
Didn't matter.
Everyone here was in danger. But there is an electric fire in human nature, John Keats said, that continually results in the birth of heroism. Last night and today, and through the long days that will follow, a lot of ordinary people will make those words come true many times.
Do you guys feel like heroes for what you did?
No, if we weren't down there, we wouldn't have been where we were supposed to be. That's where we were supposed to be. That's why we got to go back.
But one guy just brought a shovel. Wow. Well, for those of you just joining us, this is ABC's continuing live coverage of the terrorist attack on the United States. I'm Derek McGinty. And at this hour, emergency crews are still sifting through the tons of rubble looking for victims of the World Trade Center attack. And as the rescue efforts here and at the Pentagon continue around the clock, so does the search for those who did this. A massive and far-reaching investigation, the Attorney General says it's the biggest ever, is underway. We begin right now, though, at the site of that New York attack, where my colleague Allison Stewart is standing by. Good morning, Allison.
Good morning, Derek. And for anyone at home who thinks that these masks might possibly be for just effect, let me assure you they're not. The scene down here assaults all the senses. The sight, of course, the pure terror of what's behind me. The smell, it smells of burning rubber and ash. The taste, there's a taste and a scratchiness in all our throats. And imagine that we're blocks away from ground zero. Imagine what the people who are working on the site are going through just physically. In fact, one worker told me it's like ants on Mount Everest. And to prove that's not a case of hyperbole, you have to think about what made up the Twin Towers. It was made of 200,000 tons of steel, 43,000 windows, 425,000 cubic yards of concrete. Those are all statistics I pulled off the World Trade Center website, which seem impressive at the time and now just seem truly, truly daunting when you consider that is the rubble that these workers are having to go through, hopefully on a search and rescue mission. Derek?
Allison, you mentioned that it's a search and rescue mission, but it seems as time goes by, there's less and less hope. How much hope do rescuers now have that they can still find any significant number of people alive, and how quickly does that hope diminish?
Well, I have to tell you, Derek, of course we're talking about search and rescue, but it's also a search and recovery mission, obviously, and Mayor Giuliani, earlier in the day, when he was asked about reports if 6,000 body bags had been ordered, his response was, quote, "Yes, that is correct." So, of course, people are hoping that they'll find people underneath the rubble, but obviously this is a recovery mission as well.
Yeah, and I guess this is not that far from where you live, right, Allison? You live fairly close to downtown. The entire neighborhood has just got to be devastated by this, and do you see still a lot of residents out, or are they in? What's going on?
Absolutely. You know, we walk down here because that's the only way you can get down to this area. And there are people outside cheering on the rescue workers as they walk through. There are people walking around near St. Vincent's Hospital asking people right and left, have you seen this person? Have you seen my father? People who have not heard from family members in so long. Not to mention something I saw which was really quite interesting. On the way home from this site yesterday, people buying postcards that still had the Twin Towers in them as some sort of remembrance.
Wow. All right, Allison Stewart, live from the site. We'll be getting back to you a little later on in the broadcast. Thank you so much. The politics of this goes on, and there were those who thought that President Bush did not get back to the White House quickly enough after all this happened. And of course, now he's there. Now he and the Congress are working out exactly what we're going to do. And working for us is Josh Gerstein, who's just right around the corner from the White House. Good morning, Josh. Still questions now about how quickly the president got back?
Well, that's right, Derek. The White House seems very defensive about this. There were a couple articles in the New York Times yesterday on Wednesday suggesting that some people thought the president was essentially AWOL on Tuesday, that he should have rushed right back to the White House, and he didn't. Well, the White House was very concerned about those suggestions and went forward and actually put out new details about the investigation that we weren't aware of to try to rebut those criticisms. They said that the Secret Service had received a specific threat saying, quote, Air Force One is next, and that the person that relayed this threat to the Secret Service had some code words which suggested a familiarity with White House procedures. They also said Vice President Cheney was told that there were as many as 6 aircraft in the air that could be considered to possibly be mounting an attack on Washington, and it was threats like those that led the president to stay away from Washington rather than any particular concern on his part that he didn't want to come back. They say he very much wanted to return to Washington, but it was decided that it was best for him not to do that. Derek?
All right, and the president did, of course, get down to the Pentagon to offer his support to those who continue to look for any possible survivors, which I guess there may not be, but any possible survivors, and of course are going through the rubble searching for the remains of those who lost their lives.
That's right, Derek. The president went down there, and now the discussion will move on to how to pay for all of this. There's a discussion now between the White House and Congress about possibly $20 billion in supplemental funding being requested to pay for disaster recovery, to pay for the investigation, and even to pay for the military retaliation that we all expect will take place sometime in the next few days or weeks.
And now, Josh, I did hear a report that the president had asked for essentially a blank check on this, and the Congress said, well, we'll give you everything you want, but not a blank check. Was there a bit of a disagreement there?
Well, the discussions are still going on. Nothing has been passed by the Congress. The Congress would have to authorize additional money. As you know, we're in a very tight budgetary situation. However, both Democrats and Republicans have set aside the big debate they were having over Social Security just a few days ago. Seems like a long time ago now. They say those issues aren't important. They're not going to squabble with each other about the small figures when there are so many lives at stake and so many lives that have been lost.
All right, indeed. Josh Gerstein, thank you so much for talking with us. We'll get back to you a little later. Well, ever since the attacks, we have been hearing incredible stories of personal tragedy, yet there have been triumphs as well. From our San Francisco station, KGO-TV, we've got some moving moments from one family, a wife's call from inside the World Trade Center to her husband.
Sean, it's me. I just wanted to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building in New York. A plane hit the building or a bomb went off, we don't know, but there's lots of smoke, and we just wanted you to know that I love you always.
The toughest thing for me right now is I can't be there. I've tried to get 4 different flights out. And if I can get any help on getting to the East Coast by any means, it would be much appreciated.
Of course, the question for him is, where is she? They don't know yet where she is, if she got out alive, if she's maybe one of the lucky ones trapped in the rubble somewhere but still living, or one of the unfortunate ones. But because of those attacks, unfortunately, U.S. stock markets are remaining closed today. Trading may not get going again until Monday. The International Monetary Fund says the attacks will have only a limited impact on the global economy, and the Standard & Poor's financial rating firm predicts there's no long-term negative impact on the U.S. economy, but that has yet to be seen. ABC's Betsy Stark looks at the immediate impact.
Businesses around the country were open, but it was not business as usual. Some stores opened late. The Limited cited security precautions, and many retailers reported fewer customers than usual.
It's not a regular Wednesday for us, and it's kind of a gloomy type of atmosphere right now.
The manager of this bookstore in Chicago says customers are in no mood to shop.
I think today people, the first day back after being at home all day yesterday watching television, everyone's sort of in a state of shock.
In Los Angeles, Universal Studios reported fewer visitors to its theme park. Midway Airlines, already in deep financial trouble, said the slowdown in air traffic would put the company and its 1,700 workers out of business. Some economists believe Tuesday's attack will push a fragile economy into a full-blown recession.
We have been performing a high wire act, and I think it has become even more perilous.
Others believe the chilling effects of Tuesday's attack will be temporary, that as the rescue mission becomes a rebuilding effort, spending will pick up, and so will consumer sentiment.
This event actually has some stimulative effects to it because this is a country that rebuilds.
For businesses at Ground Zero, the focus is on the human toll. Among the tenants in the World Trade Center, Bank of America has accounted for most of its 400 workers, insurer Marcia McLennan for several hundred of its 1,700 workers, and in a video message to employees, the CEO of Morgan Stanley, the largest tenant in the Twin Towers, said most of its 3,500 workers got out safely.
The reason they did is they started evacuating World Trade Center 2 immediately upon hearing about the terrorist attack on World Trade Center 1.
The firm now wants customers to know that despite the devastation, their assets and records are safe.
What the clients need is all of you calling the clients, talking to them, giving them reassurance.
Morgan Stanley and other Wall Street firms developed sophisticated backup systems after the World Trade Center bombing of 1993.
Most of these firms run what are called hot backup sites. That is a place that's running real time somewhere else in the world, often across the river in New Jersey, where the systems are running in parallel with those main systems.
And one part of our economy that won't be coming back to normal, at least not anytime soon, seems to be the entertainment economy. The TV networks have decided to delay any number of shows that were due to start this month in the fall season. For example, the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences is looking for a new date for the 53rd Annual Emmy Awards. First time ever it's been delayed. NBC has decided to delay several series, as has CBS, and any number of them. In the meantime, in Hollywood, executives have postponed the release of any number of films that might relate to terrorism. For example, Arnold Schwarzenegger's latest movie, Collateral Damage, in which a terrorist bombs a Los Angeles skyscraper, that was supposed to come out October 5th. That's been indefinitely delayed, and there are any number of others. NFL football, they'll decide apparently today whether or not the games will be played Sunday. There was supposed to be a big fight Saturday night at Madison Square Garden. That had been put off as well. No date yet for a rescheduling of that. Now, we go to the latest information on exactly what's going on at the primary site here in New York City, where everything went bad earlier this week. Allison Stewart joins us live from there with the latest on the effort to dig out. Allison?
Good morning, Derek. And it's Hollywood has helped out a little bit down here, a very little bit. You can see behind me those giant lights that they're using to work through the night are the type they use on the large Hollywood sets whenever they film at night. What's going on down there? Excuse me, a lot of jackhammering, a lot of welding. Some large cranes have been brought in, but they want to be used tenderly and sparingly. They're afraid of dislodging any rubble, possibly harming survivors. One person described to me as difficult and dangerous work, Derek.
So, Allison, this is going on around the clock, of course. Any word on how much they found so far, what kind of results they've come up with?
No, the last I heard that all the work was being concentrated in one area. I'm not really sure why, to be honest, but all the workers, one of the workers I did speak to said that whenever they find out something or they think they hear someone, everybody rushes to one area, works on it. When they discover whether it's worthwhile to keep working or not, they abandon it and they continue on.
All right. ABC's Allison Stewart, thank you so much. We'll talk with you a little later on. Right now, though, we want to recap the latest information on the terrorist attacks. For a second straight night, crews, as you just saw, desperately searching through the rubble of the World Trade Center. But, of course, with each passing hour, hopes for finding more survivors grows dimmer. The final death toll still far from certain. New York officials, however, have asked for a very gruesome-sounding 6,000 body bags. In Washington, D.C., the president and Congress talking about possible retaliation. The FBI has identified 15 alleged hijackers, possibly as many as 24 of them. And the Los Angeles Times reports 10 suspected accomplices, in the attacks are still at large. 40, however, have apparently been identified. Hundreds of federal agents are stepping up security at airports. Some airports are back open again. A large majority, however, of commercial flights are still grounded. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the stock markets will remain closed today, possibly until Monday. And in the aftermath of the attacks, donations are pouring in. A lot of companies, big companies, small companies, have donated millions of dollars to help the victims. Now, in an effort to build support for whatever retaliation the United States might take, President Bush is phoning other world leaders, and there are a lot of expressions of support coming in. ABC's Nathan Thomas joins us now from London. Good morning, Nathan. I understand that they want to invoke Article 5 of the NATO agreement. What does this all mean?
Good morning, Derek. And yes, NATO has already done that. And while attention since Tuesday has been consumed by the attacks on New York and Washington, it's important to realize, and perhaps a little easier from our perspective here in London, that Americans are not alone in much of this, and the world remains glued to television sets. From all over come words and demonstrations of support. With its flags at half-staff, NATO, for the first time in its history, has invoked the principle that an attack on one is an attack on all. If the United States decides the terrorism came from abroad, all 19 countries are now potentially involved.
Accordingly, the United States NATO allies stand ready to provide the assistance that may be required as a consequence of these acts of barbarism.
The tone of solidarity with America was echoed in London, where the Prime Minister called Parliament back into session to discuss the implications of the attack on America.
The United States has been singled out, but there is no doubt at all that these terrorists will regard us all as targets.
Since Tuesday, there are 1,000 extra police on the streets of London. One commander said as a deterrent to terrorists, but also as a reassurance to an increasingly nervous public. Britain and many other countries are facing their own losses from the attack aimed at New York's financial center. The London markets were open, but with a moment of silence, it was hardly business as usual. One company lost its entire British staff in New York. In what is a global financial market, most everyone lost someone they knew, if only on the telephone.
A feeling of total devastation, of a loss of one's family. You can't blame them. They've known and dealt with these people now, many of them for up to 20 years, certainly between 5 and 20 years. Speak to them every day across the line in New York, work with them, trade with them, cooperate with them. They're family. And one day they're there and the next day they're not.
With attention focused on Osama bin Laden as possibly responsible for the attack, Muslim groups are reminding Americans they are not all terrorists. Having the most difficult time are perhaps the Palestinians, especially after a grieving America watched some of them celebrate. So angry are some Palestinians that one of the photographers who took the celebration pictures has been threatened with death. Palestinian leaders are going to great lengths. Yasser Arafat had himself photographed donating blood for American victims to try and show most Palestinians are not celebrating.
This horrendous and massive act of terrorism against the innocent American people is an act of absolute immorality and evil.
In a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon, this man said, "We don't wish for the destruction of the American people, just for Bush and the Congress, because they are supporting Israel." But reaction from overseas also comes from thousands of Americans. Some stuck in airports from London to China because of flight restrictions are finding sympathy and a helping hand in sometimes unexpected places. Their thoughts are mostly back home, as are those of Americans who live and work overseas, many now feeling pretty helpless.
We're powerless. I mean, everybody in the States, we got an email today saying, put your American flags up. What can we do? I mean, we can't do anything, because if we do, we're a target.
Like those back home, they want to do something, but there is little they can do at this point but breathe. There have been vigils and church services in many, many countries. American embassies that were closed are beginning to reopen, but security all over the world remains very, very tight today, Derek.
Well, Nathan, right now we get reports from the Saudi press agency that the Saudi Arabian government is offering its support for whatever the United States decides to do here. It's interesting because when you compare it to the Gulf War, when President Bush then had to build a coalition, it seems the coalition is coming together without much effort this time around.
It certainly seems to be that way. I mean, throughout the world, and we're seeing reports from all over here in London, there is sympathy and there is anger all over the world that this has happened. Everybody seems to have the idea that if it happened to the United States, it can certainly happen here. Here being here in London or France or anywhere. And people are worried, and I don't think there's going to be much problem with a coalition forming, pretty much with everyone in it, to go after terrorism.
ABC's Nathan Thomas in London, thank you much. Well, while the Congress, or should I say while American attention has since Tuesday been consumed by the attacks on New York and Washington, it's important to understand, and perhaps a little easier to see from our perspective, that there are many things going on. The Congress is showing support for President Bush. It unanimously passed a resolution expressing solidarity and vowing retaliation against those who were responsible for Tuesday's attacks. Yesterday, ABC's Peter Jennings talked with the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Joseph Biden.
Senator Joe Biden, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. At the time of the Gulf War, when President Bush, former President Bush, got an authorization from Congress where there was an enemy you could identify, and there was a coalition which was prepared to go to war. So if you have are we going to declare war against today?
Well, as John McCain said earlier, I don't know who we declare war against. That's why I think to meet the constitutional criteria under the War Powers Clause of the Constitution, you need only authorize the use of force. I think the declaration of war is a bit over the top, not in terms of the damage done to us, but in terms of who we are declaring war against. It's usually a nation state you declare war against.
But is there a movement in Congress, in the Senate, or in the House tonight to have a declaration of war? Is it a significant movement?
No, I really don't think so. I'm part of that so-called leadership that is actually our staffs are meeting right now to provide the president with the full authority he needs to respond once we identify who is responsible for this act and those who are complicitous. As you know, Peter, because I know you know the UN pretty well, under the UN Charter, under one of the articles, we're allowed to act in self-defense against a nation state if, in fact, they're, in this case, harboring and/or were part or complicitous in this act. But one of the most significant things, if I can say, that's happened, and Secretary Powell deserves a great deal of credit, for the first time in history, the NATO organization voted today to treat this attack on the United States as an Article 5 attack, which that means is Article 5 says an attack on one is an attack on all. And if we determine that they, in fact, those who perpetrated the attack were from abroad, then, in fact, we will have the full support of all of our NATO allies in hunting them down and responding to whatever military action is needed. And that is a gigantic development.
Well, again, I apologize for being skeptical on an occasion like this, because I know the country and somebody get you a drink of water, too. I think we all need it, too. Somebody please give Senator Biden a drink of water.
Maybe I could get a drink of water.
Yeah, and we all need it today. But let me just add a note of professional skepticism here, too, in terms of coming to allies and getting an invocation under Article 5 of the NATO allusion that an attack at one is an attack. I'll remind you of Bosnia and how difficult it was to get the NATO alliance to go and do something.
But Peter, that was a very different thing. We never got an Article 5 there because it was not viewed as an attack on any of the nation states. The argument there was Bosnia and the Balkans are not part of NATO, therefore Article 5 does not pertain. This is a very different deal.
Well,
I
take your point in a technical sense, Senator, but I wonder whether or not what we're seeing today, for obvious reasons, from the country's allies and certainly from the country itself, is part of this gut reaction to do something, and at least for the moment, let's all hang in here together.
You know what I think we're seeing, and I hope I'm right about this, obviously only time will tell. People in the Senate today and around the country were talking about the end of life as the way we know it. I refuse to view it that way. I believe this may be the beginning of the end of the ability of terrorist organizations to have widespread networks and the support of client states. And the reason I say that is this. I believe every world leader from Jiang Zemin to Putin could picture that jet slamming into them, slamming into their country. They're all of a sudden beginning to realize that their support of these organizations may come back to bite them in a big way. You take a look at Russia now beginning to look at Iran in a way that's very different, where they're concerned about fundamental Muslim states in the stands. You look at China's concern about what happens with Pakistan. And I just think we may be, if we do this properly, if we lead properly, we may be able to turn this into a very, very positive way in which to ultimately deal with terrorism. Because as you've pointed out, the ability to deal with terrorism on our own long term is very difficult to do without the cooperation of other nations.
And I appreciate, Senator, this is a very long discussion, even a debate that will be held in the country and with other countries. But you use the example of Russia. Russia has... do you envision the United States following a path similar to that of the Russians, who have endured in the capital Moscow horrendous violence as a result of the war in Chechnya? And look what the Russians have done to Chechnya. Can you imagine the United States getting itself into that kind of a situation?
No, but I can imagine I think there would be a very different circumstance if, in fact, for example, it's very much in Russia's interest. Let's just assume for the sake of discussion, and I'm not saying this is the case. Assume for the sake of discussion that this is a bin Laden operation. Assume for the sake of discussion that the Taliban gave aid and comfort and is presently dealing with hiding him and others. It's very much in Russia's interest. It's very much in the moderate states in the Middle East's interest. It's very much in NATO's interest that, in fact, that circumstance be altered. It's a very different circumstance when the entire world is decided to make Afghanistan a pariah state and to respond, even with military force. But again,
and let me interrupt you again.
I want
to interrupt you again because, again,
That's right.
You want to just make this a part of discussion, and I think it's almost academic at the moment. Indeed, Afghanistan is already a pariah state. And the Taliban,
it is a pariah state, but no one's willing to act against
well, what would you do?
State.
What would you do against Afghanistan?
There's a lot of things you could do. First of all, the Pakistani government's going to have to make a decision about whether it continues to cozy up with the Taliban.
That's an issue for Pakistan.
Pardon me?
That's an issue between the United States and Pakistan, it seems.
Oh, it darn right is. But if, in fact, I am correct about the response that the world is potentially willing to take, including NATO, Pakistan has nowhere to look if China, Russia, and the United States, along with the European nations, make it clear that this is a condition upon which they have to essentially choose sides. The ability of the Taliban to be able to maintain itself in the present posture it is dependent in part upon the ability to deal with Pakistan. But as you point out, this is a bit of a moot point. Right. What is not moot at the moment is that I believe there is absolute resolve on the part of you. For example, I was asked in an earlier program, would the American people support the use of ground forces if we determined exactly what the target was?
Classic question.
My answer is absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. This is an unprecedented attack upon the American people. They weren't willing to go. The entire British Army was floating in the English Channel, and we did not react. But once Pearl Harbor was hit, we reacted. There's a fundamental difference you guys don't get. This is, in fact, an attack upon the United States. American citizens are dead. This is not Bosnia. This is not anything else.
Okay, Senator, I take your point. Let me move on to something else because it's a much more, not much more immediate, but certainly an immediate issue. There's been discussions in Congress today as to how much money might be appropriated or set aside to fight or to intensify this campaign against terrorism. I think the figures are about somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 billion a year going to this fight already. How much money has been discussed today setting aside to escalate the war?
Well, there hasn't been much discussion about detail money, but those of us who have been dealing with this a lot can give you some numbers. For example, there was a recent commission that has proposed a $30 billion 10-year program to deal with just corralling chemical weapons. There is a proposal that we need now for the intelligence community to be able to be beefed up before this happened, about $3 billion. We're going to have to make a very difficult decision, and it's easy for me, from my perspective. What is our priority in this nation in terms of our defense needs? Is it really to spend $500 billion, up to $500 billion on a national missile defense, or is it to now spend an additional $30 or $40 billion to deal with homeland threats that relate to pathogens, relate to chemical weapons, relate to beefing up our intelligence capacity?
I hear you trying to change the parameters of the debate that is currently going on between your party and the president about the validity of having a national missile defense program. So I hear politics.
It's not about the validity, it's about the priority.
Okay, I take the priority. The president very much wants a national missile defense program. You and your party are resisting him, or certainly resisting the dollars he wants for it. Do I hear the debate changing?
Well, I think the debate has changed.
Okay.
I think it has changed.
Senator Joe Biden says we just don't get it, but I think all you have to do is look at this scene down at what was left of the World Trade Center, and you will know that people do get it, that we know that this country has been attacked, and that now is the time when so many have pulled together to try to deal with the consequences of that attack, the very human consequences of that attack, as folk look through the rubble, continuing the round-the-clock search, hoping against hope that maybe a few more people may have survived. Of course, there's the gruesome figure of 6,000 body bags that the New York officials have asked for, and it's very difficult to deal with that. Back at the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol, hundreds of Congress members are trying to deal with it by offering prayers and condolences to the victims of the attacks. Capitol Hill police officer David Nelson was singing Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
And for those of you just joining us, this is ABC's continuing coverage of the aftermath of the terrorist attacks. I'm Derek McGinty. Here is the latest. In a grim sign of just how devastating the attack on the World Trade Center was, New York officials have requested 6,000 body bags. President Bush and the Congress talking about possible retaliation. Hundreds of federal agents are stepping up security at airports. So far, though, only very limited numbers of flights have been approved. The stock market's still closed today, and offers of help are pouring in. Corporations and others have donated millions of dollars. But we begin this morning at Ground Zero, where my colleague Allison Stewart is right near the site of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. And Allison, I see you still have that mask, and the digging goes on.
The digging does go on, Derek, as well as the tireless work of all the various police officers, Army officers, Air Force officers, and then the people who are here to help the people who are helping those, hopefully, who are still alive in the wreckage. I'm joined by Charlene Maddox of the Salvation Army. You're leaving behind your ministerial duties today. What are you doing down here, Charlene?
We're just serving coffee, tea, providing soup, sandwiches, candy, anything we can really give the workers to help them and keep them going at this moment.
I can't imagine they have a lot of time to eat.
Well, one of the really strange stories is some of the trucks are going past and we're actually having to run to the truck and ask them what they want, throw sandwiches in, give them coffee on the run. So they really don't have much time. A lot of people are just grabbing coffee or tea, grabbing a sandwich and just carrying on.
You were telling me earlier that the generosity of the people have overwhelmed you and what they've given you.
Yeah, we come from Connecticut, and in New Haven, where one of our bases is, people were just giving and giving and giving. Our divisional headquarters is in Hartford, and people are just ringing off the hook.
When I approached you and saw you earlier, you did not have your mask on, although we're all being told to wear a mask, obviously for health reasons. Why didn't you have your mask on?
I just thought that when people approached the canteen, I just didn't want them to see the mask. I wanted them to see a friendly face, someone smiling at them and just being welcoming towards them.
All right, Charlene, we've kept you long enough. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Back to you, Derek.
All right, thank you, Allison. Attorney General John Ashcroft says the search for those who did this may be the most massive and intensive investigation ever conducted in this country, and there are some big numbers involved with it. ABC's Rebecca Cooper joins us now from Washington. She's got the latest on that investigation. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, Derek. Law enforcement has moved swiftly in the last 24 hours to identify those individuals involved in the hijacking. Attorney General Ashcroft, as you noted, held a press conference yesterday and said that there were 3, or as many as 6 individuals per plane involved directly in the hijacking. And the law enforcement agencies have been able to identify those using Flight Manifest. And in the coming days, they tell ABC News this morning, they may be prepared to identify as many as 50 individuals involved in the hijacking. Meanwhile, President Bush met with Congress yesterday and received a show of bipartisan support for any measures he deems necessary for retaliatory strikes. But one word of caution, Derek, as you noted earlier, Congressman David Obey did say, and he is the ranking House Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, that they will not issue the president a blank check for spending in issuing these retaliatory strikes. Congressman Obey noting that there are still budget concerns in the United States and a faltering economy. Derek?
Yeah, I'm very curious about the speed as to which the FBI managed to identify these 50 people. Note that they knew where 40 of them were, 10 still on the loose. How did they get this so quickly?
They used the flight manifest, and the individuals listed on the flight manifest had intelligence records both in the United States. And another way that the United States has been able to move so quickly is a senior administration official told me earlier that we would be surprised to learn the number of countries that have been aiding in the intelligence gathering. He said there are obvious allies of the United States helping, but he said there are also other countries that may surprise people in the amount of help that they are providing us in the intelligence gathering.
So in other words, with all this help, that allowed the investigation to move a lot more quickly than otherwise might have been expected. What's the next step?
The next step is in determining not only what size of force should be used in a retaliatory strike, but what to strike. That's going to be very difficult and indeed. And one of the debates that's going to be continuing in Congress is whether President Bush needs a fully authorized resolution giving him full use of force, one very similar to the one that was passed for Operation Desert Storm. By law, it's unclear whether President Bush actually needs that. Congress and the White House both saying that the resolution that's already been passed gives him the full authorization he needs. And both Democrats and Republicans say it may not be necessary to go any further.
All right, Rebecca Cooper in Washington, thank you so much. I just want to give people an idea of the level of investigation that's going on. 20 FBI field officers are now fully involved in this case. That means 4,000 special agents and 3,000 support employees all involved in this investigation. It's no surprise then that the Attorney General calls it the biggest and most massive investigation ever. Meantime, you are looking at the grim recovery effort still going on in Manhattan, in the lower part of town where the World Trade Centers once stood. But the recovery effort is still going on at the Pentagon as well. Firefighters finally able to get those fires out from the hijacked plane hitting that building. ABC's Jim Sciutto is there where the recovery effort goes on. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Derek. What they're doing now is shoring up the building with wooden beams. We heard the saws going before as they cut them to fit them in. Structural integrity, a problem, of course, and before rescue workers can get in there, get closer in there, they want to make sure it is safe. But they are looking now for possibly survivors, although the hope is extremely slim, but also victims, and they are removing bodies. They have dogs going over the site, fiber optic cameras, microphones, as well as just physically looking. I just got off the phone with a member of the Fairfax County Rescue Squad who was inside there just moments ago. He said it was like you took a box and shook it up, all the contents inside, to describe the scene in there, the disarray.
It sounds awful, Jim. Interestingly, though, the Pentagon is a very old structure, pre-war construction, as they like to say here in New York. Apparently amazingly stout. This could have been much, much worse had it not been as strong a building as it is.
That's what we hear, that it was so strong. I spoke with the fire chief in charge of the rescue here. He's describing a building where the walls are 2 feet thick, the floor is 2 feet thick, solid construction, and they say that made all the difference in the world. When you look at the building, it's amazing really to think that a plane of the size, a commercial jetliner, caused, granted that is a lot of destruction, but you would have thought it might have caused more. So the building did hold up quite well throughout.
And I guess right now the hope of finding anybody alive in the rubble is pretty much gone, or is there?
Not gone. They are still calling this a search and rescue operation, emphasis on the rescue. And as I said, dogs, cameras, microphones looking, but admittedly the hope very slim.
All right. Jim Sciutto at the Pentagon, thank you so much. This is a tough situation for everybody, trying to understand and cope with the attack. Everybody's having trouble, even adults, but getting children to comprehend what's taken place can be even more challenging. ABC's Peter Jennings talked with a child psychologist, Dr. Harvey Koplowitz of New York University's Child Studies Center. Here's what he had to say.
Quite clearly, the kids who are most at risk are the children who have the most personal involvement, whether they were there and witnessed the event or whether their parent is lost or has died in this or been injured in this terrible event.
Now, this is a universal problem. How do we talk to our children about acts of violence which they do not necessarily readily understand? I know we all have somewhat different ideas about this. let me be parent for a second. I've always believed the first thing to tell your children was that you are safe and that the bad people out there are not after you. Is that good advice?
Well, it really depends on how old the child is. And the best advice would be to start off by asking the kids what they understand and what they've heard. Remember, the TVs have been on in most people's homes for hours and hours every single day. This is an extraordinary, historic, and horrific event. So across the United States, all of a sudden, because it occurred in New York, it's part of our backyard. It's in our neighborhood. And so, number one, talk to your children if they're very young and find out what they know, and then explain about the good guys and the bad guys, and that we are going to find the bad guys. There's no ambiguity about this, and that we have a government that is taking action to make it safe. Because kids are most interested in what's happening to me. Who's going to pick me up at school tomorrow? Can we go on the plane to Grandma's house for Christmas? And reassuring them is important. For older kids, though, and for kids under the age of 5, I don't think they should be watching TV.
Yeah, but what do you do about that? You've just made the point yourself. All across America, television sets are on all the time in homes all over the country. Do you do any harm by telling your kid you can't watch that?
Yeah, I don't think it's any harm. I think it's a positive parenting kind of technique to say, you know what, you're going to watch in another room and you're going to watch a video on the VCR, or I'm going to shut off the television and I'll do it, you know, twice a day. In the morning I'll watch and in the afternoon I'll watch, but it's adult images. It's very important to remember that a little child who sees a scene again and again of that plane going into the World Trade Center doesn't understand that it's not happening again and again, that it's just one event, and it becomes more frightening. Kids don't like to see parents out of control. They don't like to see the adults in the world out of control. And if they're older children, if they're more than 6 years of age, and let's say 6 to 12, parents should sit with them while they're watching. They should help them comprehend what's going on. And again, I would monitor how much time you're going to watch the news. I think you're doing a great job, but I think there's a limit to how much a family with young children should be watching this program.
I think you quite agree. I agree with you on this. You certainly got to ration television under all circumstances, certainly under these circumstances. Let me just try a couple of academic questions with you. I'll try to play a child here, 5 to 12. You pick a figure. Why is it happening, Dad or Mom?
Right. I think that, again, being able to talk in language that children understand, and to explain, by the way, that you're frightened also, but that there are people who are bad, who dislike us or hate us without really knowing us, and have taken an action against us that is really horrific. It's absolutely horrible. And we weren't prepared. We didn't know that something like this could happen. And now the government is going to become more, first of all, they're getting very good at trying to find these people. As we heard from the Attorney General and from others in charge, they're going after the bad guys. But also, they're going to make the airplane safer. We're going to see that the next time we go on an airplane. And the important part is, in your life, we're going to keep it very safe. Your school is safe. I'm going to make sure that when you go to school, I'm going to be around, and you're going to reassure them. You should also be aware that even when you talk to kids like this, the conversation isn't a one-shot deal. This is a kind of conversation that, depending on your child, who might not be that talkative, you might have to bring it up again later on. Or they may not want to talk about it, they might want to draw a picture, or they might want to write a poem about it. Not everyone behaves the way we'd like them to behave when it comes to talking about difficult topics. But parents have to bring this up. This is not one of those topics where if you don't say anything, your kid isn't thinking about it. He's just hearing from you that you're nervous.
And that is child psychologist Dr. Harvey Koplowitz of the New York University Child Studies Center. Of course, one of the consequences of the information age is that you can watch television all the time, getting all the information you want. One of the great things about it, though, is that you can communicate back to us, and you've been doing that via email. And I'll share a couple of them with you. One person says, Daniel Zelinsky says, you've been talking about how the U.S. will fund the upcoming military events. My wife and I feel the government can have the tax rebate check back. It was a good feeling to know the government was thinking of us. Now we feel the government should know we are thinking of the American people. And a similar spirit from overseas. I would like to suggest that you might look to other countries where there is a great outpouring of love, compassion, and brotherhood to the U.S. In Germany, people are in churches praying for the American people, the embassies showered with flowers, and a German government official said in reference to Kennedy many years ago, saying, Ich bin ein Berliner, he said, today, we are all Americans. So the spirit and the emotion brought about by this awful event is around the world. Now we want to bring you up to date on the latest information about this awful event, the terrorist attacks. Under the glare of spotlights, scores of emergency workers still desperately combing through the rubble of the World Trade Center. Some survivors have been pulled out, but city officials are braced for the worst. They have asked the federal government for 6,000 body bags. In Washington, the president and Congress discussing possible retaliation. The FBI has identified 15 alleged hijackers, possibly as many as 24, and the Los Angeles Times reporting that 10 suspected accomplices in the attacks are still at large. Hundreds of federal agents stepping up security at airports. A few airports have reopened, but a large majority of commercial flights are still grounded, and the stock markets will remain closed today and possibly until Monday. In the aftermath of these attacks, donations are also pouring in. Companies, big companies, small companies, donating millions of dollars to help the victims. Well, now we'll go back down to ground zero, where Allison Stewart, my colleague, has been all evening telling us exactly what's going on and sort of sharing with us the human stories of people who are really giving their all to deal with this event. Allison.
Good morning, Derek. Actually, one of the things that's so amazing down here is you realize this is a search and rescue mission at its best and a search and recovery mission at its worst. But of course, all day, walking around the streets of New York yesterday, I saw people, I was down at the hospital with flyers, pictures. Have you seen my husband? Have you seen my father? Have you seen my daughter? And someone came up to me and said, Allison, would you please get this on the air tonight, please? This I promised I would, so I'm going to. This is Fred Gabler. Fred Gabler is 6'1". He's 200 pounds. This was given to me by his friend. Fred Gabler's wife is 6 months pregnant. Fred has not been home. He was in Tower 1 on the 104th floor. If anyone has seen Fred Gabler, of course his friends and family are hoping that he's one of these 1,700 that are injured. I'll give you the phone number. It's 212-677-7007. He's just one of the many of the loved ones people are hoping will come home, Derek.
That is truly a heartbreaking story, and as you point out, there are any number of people in that very same situation hoping and praying that maybe a phone call will come in. Even now, they are hoping for and praying that they might be still alive. Meantime, thousands of people did narrowly escape the unfolding horror of Tuesday's attack on the World Trade Center, and ABC's Peter Jennings talked with one woman who did make it out alive.
Stephanie Brown works as a bond broker at One World Trade Center in the North Tower for a company called Garvin.
That's correct.
If I pronounce it correctly.
Yes.
And is one of a number of people who've taken the time, for which we're very grateful, to come and tell us what has happened. You were in the building for plane number 1, and you were on the ground for plane number 2, and I gather you, am I correct?
I was in the stairwell for plane number 2.
You were still in the building for plane number 1 and plane number 2. And then you managed to take off, and you took off, and before you'd gone too very far, you heard that your place of employment was gone.
Well, we were actually on the train on our way home. We got out of the building right after the second one hit and ran uptown, up Broadway, and made it up to the 23rd Street PATH station and got on the last PATH train out of the city.
So you were going to New Jersey?
Yes.
Right.
And we came out of the tunnel and looked back, and someone said, they're gone. The World Trade Center's gone. I said, it can't be gone. Where could it have gone? It doesn't just disappear.
Yeah, it's the World Trade Center.
Yeah. And then when I finally got in touch with my family, they told me they had watched my building collapse.
Your family must have just been crazy.
They were. They were all at my house waiting for me.
Right. Now, you've come to work, as so many people have, from across the Hudson River on the New Jersey side, and before you ever crossed the river, in fact, from many, many miles away in New Jersey, the twin trade towers have always been there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've come across the river today. What's the experience of not seeing these two great landmarks there?
It's a huge loss. I can't believe it. I saw the skyline, and it didn't even look familiar to me. I always see the trade centers and know that I work there. I can't even describe it.
Do you know about the well-being of your colleagues at the company you work for?
Actually, just a few hours ago, I heard from the last man that I work with on my particular desk, and he was okay. He was actually assisting some of the people working there, getting everyone out, and that's why he couldn't get in touch with us sooner. But I spoke to him, so far, my company, it seems everybody's all right.
What have you been doing since?
Watching the news.
Really?
Talking to people. I've had phone calls from all over the country, my cousins and family and friends.
It must make an enormous difference in terms of rebonding with your family.
It does. Not only my family, but all my coworkers. I feel I can't wait to see them all because we've been through so much together. And the gentleman that I left the building with, Dan Lavalier, was the reason that I was able to get out of the city. Without him, I would have been stuck there.
Now, as you watch the news coverage over the day and a bit since this actually happened to you, and you see what we're talking about, and you see it on television, what are we missing in terms of your experiences?
The trip down the staircase was terrible. We saw people coming down that had been injured and burnt and were bleeding. They were walking 100 stairs down, and they were very stoic. And the firefighters that I saw going up, I saw probably 100 firefighters in the building.
Who were passing you going up as you were coming down?
On the same staircase and carrying all their equipment. They had a long way to go, and I know that they were just walking up stairs into a disaster.
What floor were you actually on?
I was on 25.
So you had a pretty good distance to come down, not as far as some, farther than others.
Yeah. Took about 40 minutes.
It's been quite fascinating to hear people talk about the orderliness of the evacuation and the experience in the stairwell. In your case, it was all reasonably calm?
Reasonably calm. There was water the last three staircases.
The sprinkler system had come on?
Right. And we got down to the bottom, walked across the concourse level, and just as we were getting towards 7 World Trade, they started to yell and scream that we needed to get out of the building immediately. And there was a sense of panic at that point because everybody had been very calm up until that point. We heard the second plane hit in the staircase, and the firefighters had walkie-talkies, so we heard what was going on. So we knew that it had not been an accident, as we had thought, but an attack.
So on the way down, you could hear the walkie-talkies of the firemen as they were going up. Has it made it better to talk about it since?
Yes, I would think so. To talk to other people that I work with and see how they got out and what their experience was, it has. Every time I see my building exploding, it's going down into nothing. I can't believe it, that I've been there for so long. There it is.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think we realize, those of us who didn't work there or don't have an intimate association with it in terms of friends or colleagues, I don't think we appreciate seeing these pictures over and over and over again in anything like the way that you must.
No, I can see the planes go in because I saw it when I was there. I saw it on the news. We knew it was a plane, but we never thought it was an attack. And to see the building that I've gone to every day for a few years now, it's unbelievable.
Well, we wish you well.
Thank
you very much for coming. I'm very glad you bonded with your family.
Thank you.
Very important. Stephanie Brown, a bond broker who worked in the North Tower on the 25th floor and is another of those who's been, if not happy, at least comfortable to share her experiences with us. Many thanks, Stephanie. I appreciate it very much.
There are so many stories of ordinary people becoming extraordinary in the face of danger. ABC's Elizabeth Vargas has profile of some of those people.
Moments after the first hijacked jet crashed into the World Trade Center, medic Gary Smiley was one of the hundreds of firefighters who rushed to the scene of the disaster.
The first plane had hit already, and there was a heavy amount of fire coming out of the building, and people were coming out of the building in droves, and there was a lot of debris coming down. One woman that was coming to me complaining of not feeling well, she said, "Look at the airplane." And we looked up, and that's when we saw the second airplane hit.
You actually saw it hit the second tower?
Yeah. As soon as I saw the second plane hit, people were going, "That's when you like it's a terrorist attack."
It was chaos as firefighters raced to evacuate survivors and medics worked to save the wounded.
Before the first tower had collapsed, we started seeing things come off the building, and we started realizing that there were people. And we all stood there, and we were just saying, "Why are they jumping?" And you looked up at the building, and you wanted to tell them, "Stop. Stop jumping." And it was just horrible. And you saw a couple actually holding hands, and they jumped off the building, and they fell together. And it was sickening. And then there was nothing you could do. And then we heard the rumble, and we looked up, and we just saw the building coming down.
They had no idea the horror had just begun.
And at that moment, you heard the roll, and you looked up, and all you saw was the second tower just go straight down. And it took no more than 5 seconds. And we just turned and you ran.
Rescue crews raced for their lives. Smiley spotted his own ambulance and dove beneath it for cover.
And I was under there for about 5 minutes as pieces as big as cars were falling around me.
Chunks of concrete the size of cars?
That looked like the framing from the building. Stuff was burning. That you couldn't see. It was as if you put a hood over your head. You couldn't see. I couldn't breathe.
The sky rained wreckage and fire, coating rescue crews in heavy dust and smoke. No one knew who was alive and who was not. For hours, Gary Smiley was one of the men listed as missing and presumed dead, even as he refused to go to the hospital to treat his own injuries and stayed waiting for someone to save.
We heard calls over the radio for people trapped in, and you just felt helpless because you couldn't go anywhere near it. And you just kept expecting them to bring you patients because that's what we were there for.
Someone to save.
There's someone to help. And there was just no one to help. Nobody came out of the building.
After working 18 hours, Smiley was hospitalized for smoke inhalation and exhaustion. Just one of the hundreds of firefighters and medics at ground zero of America's worst terrorist attack.
And that report from ABC's Elizabeth Vargas. Interestingly, another email piece of feedback from America. This from someone calling themselves just Becky. She says, please, please, please focus more on the good stories coming out because I think that is what the country needs right now. Becky, you just saw one of those stories, a story of a very brave firefighter among many, many brave people who are trying to help. Unfortunately, thousands of people are still unaccounted for following the attacks Tuesday. Wives, husbands, sisters, brothers, sons, and daughters, all with anxious relatives, hoping desperately, frantically looking for some sign that their loved one is still alive. We have to tell that story too, and ABC's John Quinones does that.
They stand in a line that stretches for blocks, waiting patiently, but in agony. Many of them clinching photographs of their missing wives, husbands, brothers, or sisters. Vanessa Langer worked on the 93rd floor of the World Trade Center. Her husband, Nick.
She's 4 months pregnant, and just married last year. And we're hoping that haven't been heard from since 9 a.m. yesterday morning.
Vanessa's sister-in-law.
I just want to find her. I don't want to think about why or how or what. I just hope that she left the building, and I really feared that she didn't.
This is the last stop in that search. On the 5th floor of this building, relatives are filling out missing person reports to find out whether their loved ones are among the dead. It's all being handled by a team of multi-denominational chaplains and grief counselors.
These folks are grieving, they're in shock, they're numb from what they're experiencing, but the grieving this is just the beginning. I mean, God.
Among those waiting for answers here, Thomas Dunbar, the father of 31-year-old Larissa Taylor. A mother of 3, she worked for an insurance company on the 94th floor of the Twin Towers.
How will you get through this?
I don't know. Like my family. Just something, somebody finds her. She has three daughters at home, and they miss her.
Larissa and her husband, Frank Taylor, celebrated their 7th anniversary the night before the tragedy.
Picked up some food, we had a little champagne, we watched the video, and, we just pretty much toasted to just being happy that we had our family.
What do you tell the girls?
I haven't told them anything yet. My little 4-year-old, she knows something happened. She's seen it on TV. She knows something happened to her mommy's building.
Today, I have seen the face of hurt, pain, anger, sorrow, sadness.
Iman Yusuf Hassan is another one of the chaplains here, a Muslim chaplain.
Many of them say to me, oh, I'm all right, and I say, you're not all right. Not today. Because this is the most difficult day of your life.
The range of emotions everybody's feeling, in 5 minutes you could go from anger to, sorrow, to hopefulness. It runs the gambit. Every couple of minutes, you never know what you're going to feel.
Sean Bittner is here searching for Angela Susan Perez, the mother of his 3 children. She worked for a law firm on the 101st floor of the Twin Towers.
What if the news that you find out is not good?
It's better than no news. It's better than making the kids wonder and everybody else not knowing. Not knowing is driving us insane.
Jacques, bring in the truck of potatoes and hand them their peelers.
This is Paul Beattini, seen on home video with his 2 young daughters. Yesterday morning, he was called to a meeting on the 102nd floor of the World Trade Center. It was the same morning his youngest daughter was starting preschool. Paul tried to get out of the meeting, but couldn't. His brother, Mark.
How would you describe your brother?
Biggest heart in the world.
Would help anybody.
Yeah, that's what I hope he thought about getting out, but he wouldn't leave anybody there if he could help somebody.
That's for sure.
Paul's sister, Nan.
Fun-loving, intelligent, loves his family dearly. As my brother was saying, would help anybody that needed help.
So if he stayed behind to help, it wouldn't surprise you?
No, not at all. Not at all.
That's how much I love him. I'd trade places with him right now.
You would trade places with him?
That's how much I love him.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
We left them waiting in line. So many families praying for a miracle, but now expecting the worst. A grim reminder, the many trucks that have arrived here to transport all the bodies. From the survivors, the same message for those of us who still have our families.
Oh, tell them every day that you love them. Don't miss a day that you love them. Let the small things go.
Just hold them close, you know, every day tell them I love you. Never hold anything back. Never keep anger in your heart.
Appreciate them. What else can you say, huh? Appreciate it. Appreciate what you have.
John Quinones, ABC News. When you see people sort of desperately gripping those pictures, it makes you understand that the Twin Towers, the trade centers, were the least things that were destroyed that day. So many lives taken away and so many things that no amount of retaliation can bring back. Well, if you're just joining us, I want to welcome you to ABC's continuing coverage of the aftermath of these terrorist attacks. I'm Derek McGinty. Rescue workers are still battling the crumbling debris and time as they look for victims amid the rubble of the World Trade Center. It's a similar scenario at the heavily damaged Pentagon right outside Washington, D.C. But first, we will go to the site of the World Trade Center where my colleague Allison Stewart has been in Lower Manhattan all morning long. Good morning, Allison.
Good morning, Derek. I have to tell you, the wind has kicked up tremendously. There's debris and grit in the air of a very acrid smell, a smell of burning tires or burning rubber. And actually, the fact that the wind is kicked up is an issue with the search teams. One rescue worker told us they keep bringing in fresh units of dogs, but that the wind and the dust is compromising their sense of smell, thereby compromising the usefulness of the dogs, Derek.
All right, thank you, Allison Stewart. We should note that the EPA has tested samples of air quality from that area, looking for possible poisons that might be and volatile compounds that might have been freed up by the destruction of the buildings. They say, though, that as of now, the compounds are undetectables or at such low levels that people should not be worried. That's what they say so far. Now, though, we turn to the job of finding out who did this. The FBI has identified 15 hijackers, possibly as many as 24. And the Los Angeles Times reports 10 suspected accomplices are still out there. The Justice Department says at least one hijacker on each of the 4 planes seized Tuesday was trained at a U.S. flight school. Meantime, though, President Bush and Congress are trying to figure out how America should respond to these terror attacks. What should we do? How much money should we spend? ABC White House correspondent Josh Gerstein joins us now with the latest on that. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning, Derek. President Bush and his advisors are continuing to debate just what response to take in response to the terrorist attacks a couple of days ago. The latest word we're getting is of a videotape that Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld sent out to troops worldwide, U.S. troops worldwide, in which he says that they may be called on to vanquish powerful and terrible enemies, and he goes on to urge them to stay the course in the challenging days ahead. That seems to suggest that there may be some U.S. military action taking place. just in the next few days or weeks. There is also discussion about how to pay for all of this. There are continuing talks between the White House and Congress over a possible $20 billion supplemental budget request. That would cover not just the cost of military action, but also the cost of the massive disaster response that's currently going on, as well as the costs of the investigation, the Justice Department investigation. The FBI, with some 4,000 agents assigned to this, will be running up a considerable tab. That's something that someone will have to pay for, and most people on Capitol Hill seem inclined to put the budget battles of recent days aside and go ahead and pay that bill, even if it amounts to $20 billion or more. Derek?
Now, Josh, as you noted earlier, the Congress has seemed to approve whatever authority the president needs to do whatever he needs to do, yet at the White House there was some question as to whether that was actually enough. What else could they be looking for?
Well, there was no formal declaration of war. Both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue seem to be saying that that's really unnecessary here, especially when it's not yet clear if there were any state actors involved, if it was something other than just a terrorist group. If there were states, if there were nations that were involved in this, then something like that might be necessary. But the White House sees the resolution that was passed unanimously by Congress on Thursday as being sufficient to move forward with whatever military response that they need. That's their assessment of it right now.
All right, Josh Gerstein, thank you so much. Across the Potomac River from Washington, the crews still working around the clock in the blackened rubble of the Pentagon, and ABC's Jim Sciutto is still there this morning. Good morning, Jim.
Statement Defense Secretary recorded yesterday, distributed to all military personnel via the Armed Forces Network. A couple of quotes from his statement. He says this is the first great crisis of the 21st century, and he quotes Winston Churchill and says this will be the military's finest hour. More updates about what's going on behind me in the Pentagon in the search and rescue. They are getting ready for what they call delayering. They're going to have to peel apart the layers of what has collapsed, but before they do that, they're shoring up the building to make it safe for search and rescue teams to get closer, shoring it up with wooden beams. But teams already, as I mentioned about a half hour ago to you, going over that with dogs, fiber optic cameras, and microphones.
I understand earlier today President Bush paid a visit to the Pentagon. What was his mission?
He came here to survey the scene. Came with Donald Rumsfeld. It was about 6 o'clock Eastern time yesterday. He was here when they unfurled the flag, the American flag, over there as a tribute, a memorial to those lost here. And he also said that he was very emotional as he came here, saying that he was angry. And he was thanking as well, of course, the rescue workers who are still hard at work here tonight.
All right, thank you, Jim Sciutto. Of course, he's not the only one, the president, that is, not the only one emotional. I think everybody's had emotions ranging from sorrow to rage over this entire incident. We also have today some extraordinary pictures of what's being called Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan, and those were taken by an ABC freelancer, Tim Cothran. ABC's Michelle Martin conducted this emotional interview with him.
He shot about an hour of it, more than an hour. And Tim, why don't you tell us what we're seeing here? And about what time did you go in?
I started shooting tape about 2:30 in the afternoon. We entered the big atrium of the old the financial center, and this atrium used to be absolutely gorgeous. But in order to get to the wreckage, we had to go through this other building. At the top of these stairs, there was some graffiti that was actually written in the sand that's everywhere as a dedication to the brothers of all the firemen, and they all consider themselves brothers. And it's very, very important to them that they be remembered. And I thought that was a very special thing there.
What are you hearing here?
Well, a lot of saws, a lot of hubbub. And you walk forward, and here's this panoramic window of this vast, vast, vast destruction and all this activity going on outside.
What was the temperature like in there? Was it hot? Was it uncomfortable to be in there?
No, well, you know, we've been very fortunate that these days have been so beautiful in New York City. So it was eerie. Here you were in this enormous amphitheater of destruction, and it was just one of the nicest days of the year. But a tremendous amount of sawing and banging. And The guys work in teams. They help each other out. Sometimes if they find a particularly hot or interesting spot, they'll work in groups of 10 or a dozen. And it's all hands-on work. They're not using any heavy tools here, as you can see. They're going bit by bit. It's arduous, it's hard, and these guys are putting all their effort into it.
It also seems rather dangerous. I see many jagged pieces of metal. Did you have a sense of being in danger while you were on top of the rubble?
There's tons and tons of broken glass all over the place. I only had tennis sneakers on, so I was pretty worried. But you picked where you walked, and you just choose where you stepped.
What are we seeing here?
Well, this is poignant in that this is a fire truck. This is a badly charred fire truck. And it's one of the few things in this valley that has been actually kind of cleaned off and hosed off. Because it means a lot to these guys. I mean, you can see it's absolutely destroyed. The tires are burned, all the rigging is destroyed. And they're using it sort of as a table, as a setup area. And it really means a lot to them. It's a staging area, as well as a place where some people get very emotional because a lot of guys died here. A lot.
And paying their respects.
And paying their respects.
Even as they continue to do the job to which they've been assigned today.
Absolutely.
Did you have a sense of being very far up? Did you have a sense of being a couple of stories up atop the rubble there?
It was really hard to gauge elevation because you're surrounded by some high pieces as well. You're sort of just this sensation of being in something of a valley. And it's just everything is smashed to atoms. There are no big pieces of anything.
And I think that this photograph speaks for itself. I think that everyone will recognize what is occurring here, that the remains of someone are being removed.
Exactly. In the 2 hours that I was there, I saw at least 10 body bags being lifted out, and they seem to find 2 and 3 sets of remains, and they used dogs. They called the dogs in, and the dogs have been there for, I'm sure, quite some time. In fact, before I left, they actually retired the dogs. The dogs actually got very fatigued, and they gave them the afternoon off, or the rest of the afternoon, which they certainly deserved. And they helped pick up body scents and so forth.
A sight that has become rather familiar from disasters in which Americans have volunteered around the world, but not one I think Americans expect to see here.
Just everybody pitching in, you know, it's the bucket brigade syndrome where guys just move stuff out, they move it to the outside. And it was really hard because even though this disaster only happened a day ago, these cadavers are starting to decompose, and it was hard. It was hard for everybody, and it made everybody realize that it's only going to get worse in coming days. These guys work in teams. They'll investigate a nook, a cranny. They'll put their heads together and come up with a plan.
And they're crawling under rather large slabs of plaster and concrete and metal. They don't seem very well protected.
Well, that's their job. They love it. They do it. There they are, scaling up enormous pieces of debris. And so as I was leaving, at about 5:15, everyone started running.
A sudden change of energy here. What's going on?
Absolutely. They got a call on the phone, over the horn, that the structure that was adjacent to us was unstable and may come down. So I hit the record button and started running along with everyone. We took a breath here to, you know, see if there was anything else going on, and then we suddenly heard this rumble, which you may hear on the tape, and it scared me to death. And that was it. We just bolted. The 60 pounds of gear I had on me weighed nothing. We just flew out of there, scared to death.
And as we have learned in an age when so many people seem to have video cameras just at the ready and providing amazing pictures of just about anything that goes on, and certainly of this event, those pictures just say so much. And as the search for the victims of this horrible event go on, the magnitude of of the casualties just is still not known. Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, however, has requested 6,000 body bags. Those body bags will be going down to Ground Zero, where the World Trade Center was and where our own Allison Stewart is right now.